The next lecture topic is photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is an extremely big topic, and we could go into photosynthesis for an entire semester if we wanted to. I know you don't, and I know I don't. We're just going to talk about it for 2 different weeks of content. It's big enough of information that I'm going to split it into 2, and this particular PowerPoint is photosynthesis 1 or photosynthesis introduction. And we'll go over a lot of the main points of photosynthesis and dig into some of the details and important points of photosynthesis that go beyond today's lecture next time. But I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I'm not going to get into the deep chemistry of photosynthesis, although you do need to know the equation. We're going to talk about an overview, what is photosynthesis. We're going to talk about how plants actually capture the energy from the sun. And then we're going to talk about the pigments and how chlorophyll and 2 different types of chlorophyll are used by plants in 2 different photosystems in order to make photosynthesis happen. So first, photosynthesis is the process that captures light energy and transforms into the chemical energy of carbohydrates. So it doesn't say light energy of the sun, because artificial light can work just as well. It's the wavelengths of light that is important. Now, the sun gives lots of wavelengths of light, and plants just use some more efficiently than others in order to convert it into carbohydrate. And carbohydrate is just a class of biological chemicals that are things like starches and cellulose and sugars. And when photosynthesis occurs, it makes the simpler forms, the sugars. Primarily a sugar called glucose is the main product of photosynthesis. Once it's made into glucose or some other simple sugar, it then can be rearranged into other carbohydrates like starches or cellulose. So where does it occur? Photosynthesis occurs in the plasma membranes of some bacteria. So the cell membrane contains these pigments and structures, the photosystems that allow them to capture light energy and run the chemical reactions right in the cell's membrane of these cyanobacteria or photosynthetic bacteria. Algae, lots of algae contain photosynthesis. All of the ones that I know of, there's likely some exceptions. Certain plants don't contain any chlorophyll and don't photosynthesize, but they're parasitic plants. But they're the exceptions. Are there exceptions in algae? I do not know. But from everything from pond algae to the giant kelp forests of Monterey Bay, algae has lots of photosynthetic capability. And then where we think of it, the leaves of plants, but not just the leaves. Some of the stems of plants can be photosynthetic sites as well. Some plants have a little bit of photosynthesis in their stems, and some plants do all of their photosynthesis in the stems, like cactus. Cactus are 100% stem photosynthesis. What do cactus have for leaves? They don't have actual leaves. They have remnants of leaves called thorns or spines. So photosynthesis takes place in 3 stages. I'll never ask you how many stages there are, because it depends on how you look at it. But the main 3, if we were to break it down in the simplest form or the simplest description, the first thing that plants need to do is capture energy from sunlight or some sort of artificial grow light. Once that energy is captured, that energy must immediately be turned into chemical energy. And the chemical energy are ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and NADPH. Now you should recognize the name adenosine triphosphate, but I'm never going to ask you to spell it. The third step is using that chemical energy that was created from sunlight or artificial light and using that energy to drive the chemical reactions to make carbohydrate by linking together carbon dioxide atoms, making sugar or glucose. So these first two are light dependent. You need light. How can you capture light if there's no light, right? You need light to capture it. So that is a light dependent reaction. And once that energy is captured from the light, it must be converted to chemical energy immediately. It's something that is a matter of milliseconds before it has to be converted to chemical energy. And we call the third step the actual chemistry of the photosynthetic reactions, the synthesis of carbohydrate from carbon dioxide. We call that the light independent reactions because it's not directly dependent on the light. It is dependent on the ATP and the NADPH. And we call this process, the whole series of steps of chemical reactions, we call it the Calvin cycle. And that's where I'm going to play softball and be nice to you guys. You need to know what the Calvin cycle is. You need to know the summary equation of it, but I'm not going to go into the details of the Calvin cycle. I'm going to only show you some important components of it that you need to know, but I'll leave the chemistry details for another class, another day. But this you need to know, and you need to memorize this exactly as it is on this slide. Photosynthesis starts with 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 of them. So it is CO2. It's not 6 CO2. It is 6 CO2 molecules. 6 is the number of them. Now the 2 is the number of oxygen atoms in a single carbon dioxide molecule. A single carbon dioxide molecule is CO2 or CO subscript 2. If you write this on a piece of paper that you submit, you type this, it's a subscript. You need to write it clearly and accurately. CO2, kind of like H2O. The 2 is a subscript written lower and smaller. You also need to know the name and know how to spell it, carbon dioxide. So I take 6 carbon dioxides, I add 12 water molecules, H2Os. You should know that one, H2O, and you should know water. And you need some light energy. And with those ingredients, nothing more than some carbon dioxide and water, with the light energy as the source of energy, it will produce, and know how producing is a right-hand facing arrow. That's important. And that is going to produce 1 molecule of glucose. And you need to memorize what glucose is, not its chemical structure in detail, just how many carbons does it have, how many hydrogens does it have, and how many oxygens does it have. And it's pretty easy numbers to remember. Everything in here is 6s and 12s. So we've got 6 carbon dioxides plus 12 waters plus some light energy produces C6H12O6, 6-12-6. With a little bit of practice, that's not too hard to memorize and be able to spell glucose. But you got to practice. If this isn't something that's easy for you to memorize, get started. Quiz yourself. Start practicing now. You also are going to make 6 waters. Now, you might see in some literature where they don't have 6 waters on the right-hand side of the equation, and they only have 6 waters on the left-hand side. Basically, it's like a mathematical equation where they've simplified it. Oh, I've got 12 on the left and 6 on the right, so I'll just cross out 6 on the right and reduce the 12 on the left to 6. If you didn't follow that, don't worry about it. But if you know photosynthesis from a different equation, I don't like that equation, and I don't use that on my tests. Because the 6 water molecules that are being produced by photosynthesis are different than the water molecules coming in. It's not like 6 water molecules weren't being used. All 12 of those water molecules on the left-hand side of the equation are being used, are being stripped for parts. And near the end, as the Calvin cycle is proceeding, new water molecules are being made from leftover parts. So they are different water molecules. And because of that, I think it's important to write it this way to be more accurate. And to wrap it up, there is a waste product of oxygen. Plants do use oxygen, and they will burn sugars for energy using oxygen, just like we do. What happens in our blood? We burn oxygen with sugar to give our cells energy. We call that cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is how we get energy from our food. Plants also can do cellular respiration, and they do need oxygen, but they make an excess of it. They make more oxygen than they need. And so this excess oxygen goes into the atmosphere. And fortunately, for billions of years, cyanobacteria on Earth were changing the Earth's atmosphere in tremendous ways. Humans couldn't live on Earth for the first couple of billion years because there was no oxygen or not enough oxygen to breathe. And after billions of years of cyanobacteria in the oceans, that set the stage for more advanced life forms to develop that need oxygen to burn fuel much more efficiently. Oxygen makes energy production, energy usage much more efficient, so higher forms of life can evolve. So there it is. There is the photosynthesis equation. 6 CO2, carbon dioxide, plus 12 H2O water, plus some light energy produces C6H12O6 glucose, plus 6 waters, H2Os, plus 6 O2s, oxygen molecules. And again, if you write this out, look at how the numbers look. They're subscripts or they are large numbers showing quantity, as in the 6 H2Os coming here. There are 6 H subscript 2 O's. Write things neatly. It matters in science. So I mentioned cellular respiration, which is almost the opposite of photosynthesis. Instead of creating sugar energy, you're now using that sugar energy to burn it to make ATP to do other work. With photosynthesis, I take sunlight to make ATP to store energy as sugar. Sunlight makes ATP and NADPH. So now I've got chemical energy, and I can store that chemical energy for later, making sugar. But with cellular respiration, now I can take that sugar and burn it with oxygen to release energy. And that energy now is used to make ATP again, but instead of it ATP driving photosynthesis, ATP is driving everything else, like my ability to move my hands and fingers and talk to you, my ability to digest my food, my ability to have my heart beat. All of the things going on in my body are dependent on ATP constantly being available to do all of the things that keep me alive. How do I get ATP? Cellular respiration, burning sugars. Well, what if you eat a hamburger? That's not sugar, that's protein and fat. Well, proteins and fats are not that chemically different than sugars. They are importantly different in some respects, but our body's enzymes can easily take a protein and break it down and turn it into a sugar. And they can take a fat and break it down and turn it into a sugar. So all of the food we eat is broken down, and the usable parts are turned into sugar, glucose that goes into our bloodstream, and it doesn't matter whether you had a bowl of cereal, a hamburger, a salad, or just stuck a slab of butter on your tongue. It doesn't matter. Eventually, your body is going to turn it into sugar, put that sugar into your bloodstream so it can go to the cells, where your cells will burn that sugar in the process of cellular respiration. And when they burn that sugar, they turn it into ATP. And now ATP can do work in the cell. So here's the equation